Welcome back, everybody, and thanks as always for joining us as we continue along your Build Your Own BPOS journey. This lesson is going to cover something a bit different that we haven't looked at all yet in this course, although it's something that does involve or can involve a lot of different areas or components of the system. As you can see on the screen, what I'm talking about is product prerequisites, sometimes just referred to simply as prerequisites, or even just abbreviated to just prereqs. So I'll probably use some of those terms or abbreviations throughout. If you're not sure what these are yet, that's okay. I'll be explaining that now, so let's get right into it. We will actually start with answering some basic questions about prerequisites, what they are, what they're used for, etc. Then we will cover all of the implementation pieces that are involved for prereqs, so just all the different areas in back office that are used or that can be used for setting prerequisites up, and where the prerequisites can be assigned, which will then apply to transactions. Then lastly, we'll go through a bunch of different use cases for the different product prerequisite types, so that you can see how each one is set up and the effects in SmartPOS when they're being used. So just a bit of background on that, we do have 8 different prerequisite types, so we will take a look at each one of those, how they can be configured and how they can then be implemented. And I come with slides again, so reusing some of these from past trainings on this topic. Hope you don't mind. They're a bit rudimental, but they're something, they're useful. So before we get into what it means to be a product prerequisite in BPOS, let's first talk about prerequisites just in a general sense. It is a term that's used often in the education space, and many of us are probably familiar with it from that application if we are familiar with prerequisites at all. So for example, a prerequisite to enroll in, let's say, Biology 210 might be that someone has already taken and passed Biology 101. As our little pigeons on the screen here are discussing, some synonyms for prerequisites are requirements, preconditions, essential, condition, necessary, etc. And to use a couple of Oxford Dictionary's definitions, as an adjective, a prerequisite is, quote, required as a prior condition. Their example sentence is, quote, the student must have the prerequisite skills, end quote. And as for a noun, which is probably more applicable for how we think of and use them in BPOS, a prerequisite is, quote, a thing that is required as a prior condition for something else to happen or exist, end quote. So you'll see when we get into the prerequisite setups in back office that we use a variation of that definition for product prerequisites. We actually state on the prerequisite screen that you'll see that, quote, a prerequisite is a condition that must be met prior to selling a product. So that leads to and sort of answers another question: why do we have product prerequisites? Well, the reason behind them is to prohibit selling a product prior to a condition being met, whatever that condition might be. And you'll see when we get into the prerequisite types in a bit that we are somewhat limited by those, by what those conditions can be, but there's also a tremendous amount of flexibility and open-endedness that can be applied. As I mentioned, we have 8 different prerequisite types that we can set up and use. So to expand on that, there are a number of reasons that a venue might want to force a condition to be met prior to selling a product to a customer. And those reasons could range from maybe they're checking whether or not a customer has a certain type of allergy. They may be requiring that a customer be of legal age to purchase something. They may be limiting sales to an account profile, or that a certain product can only be sold by a certain operator group. But we'll get into all of these with some use cases later. And then for our final little question here, how do prerequisites work? This will get answered a bit more thoroughly as we get into the use cases also, because depending on the prerequisite type that's being used and some of their configuration options, there are some differences that we'll encounter with the workflows once we get into SmartPOS. But to sum it up for now, it is really as simple as step 1, create the prerequisite based on a condition that needs to be met. Step 2, assign that prerequisite, and we'll get into that soon when we see how they're implemented, because they can be assigned at different levels throughout back office. They can be assigned to specific products or to a venue, store, or a till. Then for step 3, depending on how the prerequisite is applied, when an operator is attempting to sell certain products or to start a transaction overall from SmartPOS, the prerequisite could be triggered, and its condition will need to be met in order to proceed. Cool, so with some basic questions about prerequisites answered there, now would be a good time to head into back office. We can start taking a look at how these can be set up and implemented throughout the system. Alright, so firstly, before we get to the prerequisite setups themselves, there is a prerequisite to prerequisites. For an operator to be able to configure and maintain them, they will need to have the Maintain Prerequisites flag turned on here on the General tab in Operator Maintenance. But that is it. So with that turned on for myself here, I can access Prerequisites, which is located in the Operational Setup menu, sort of near the top here. As we might expect, this being a new database where we haven't used prerequisites yet, the prereq list is going to be empty. And nothing out of the ordinary here, just options to add, edit, delete, and print. So we will just go ahead and add a new one. We'll have a quick look, but we'll come back to these later and we'll explain each of these 8 different prerequisite types. But we can see right at the top a little explanation of what prereqs are. I had alluded to this a minute ago. It says a prerequisite is a condition that must be met prior to selling a product. Set up the prerequisite here and then add it to the specific products directly or via change by range. As you'll come to see, we can also add it at the venue, store, or till level to have a bit more of a broader reach. Cool. Now, the form itself is not too complicated. We need to just start with obviously giving the prerequisite a name. So this one can just be demo OK prompt for now. Then we would need to choose the prerequisite type. I'll just leave this as OK prompt. And as I said, we will get to and explain each of the different prerequisite types very shortly. But I did just want to point out for now that as I tab through these, you will notice that each one may have some different configuration options below, depending on what the prerequisite type is. But like I said, we will just stick with OK prompt for now. The one constant thing between the prerequisite types is going to be our prompt text, this text field over here, which is where we can enter some custom text to appear on the message prompt that will show at the till or may show at the till. That message will appear when an operator triggers a prerequisite. So for our little basic example here, I'm just going to enter if you're human, click OK. You'll see this is a very basic prerequisite type. We can opt to leave that this prompt text field blank, in which case a generic default prompt would be used instead, and we'll see a few of those as we get to some examples later. But in this example here, being an OK prompt prerequisite type is the most basic that we've got. It will literally just be a message prompt asking the operator to click OK before proceeding. So what I'll do is I will just save this and we will see it in action in a bit. And note this prompt here, prerequisites are cached at the tills to ensure speedy operation. Do you wish to refresh all the prerequisites at the connected tills? Just go ahead and click yes, and then just a confirmation there. Cool. Now, creating a prerequisite is only the first part. If we don't then assign it to something, it will never actually be triggered. So to continue with this example, I'll use our newly created demo OK prompt here. And as far as assigning it goes, we do have some different options that I've mentioned. So first of all, we can assign a prerequisite to a venue, store, or till, meaning that we can apply it at a broader venue level or limit its application to a specific store or a till. So if we head to our venue, store, and till settings, you may have noticed this previously here. If I open up venue settings, actually, you may have noticed this drop down here in the miscellaneous section all the way at the bottom, labeled product prerequisite. So now that I have a prerequisite added to the database, it will be listed here and we can use it. So with this being set at the venue level, anytime an operator goes to add a product to a transaction in SmartPOS at any workstation in this venue, they will encounter that prompt. So let me just save that and we will check that out. Okay, so with that applied at the venue level, any transaction started now is going to encounter that very basic OK prompt with our prompt text. If you're human, click OK. So we need to bypass that prerequisite and just click OK to be able to continue. Very basic example there, but we could see that the prerequisite was triggered and that we needed to meet the condition prior to continuing. The condition in this case is just acknowledging that prompt and clicking OK. Cool, so back to back office. Before we continue, an important thing to know about prerequisites is that they do not override each other. So if we have one set at the venue level and a different one set at the store or till level, or at all three, they could all be triggered within the same transaction depending on their settings. But they will be encountered in succession, beginning with the highest level. So we would encounter the venue level prerequisite first, then the store level, then the till. And I mentioned this earlier, but aside from assigning prerequisites to venues, stores, or tills, we can also assign them at the product or prod store level. So I will just open our product list and just open any product here to give you an example. Let's go with our BPOS lager bottles. So here on the product settings tab, we have this prerequisite dropdown. And if a prerequisite is set here, it would apply to the product being sold anywhere, regardless of which store we're selling it in. Whereas if we head to the store/pricing settings tab, we have a store product prerequisite setting here where we could separately set a prerequisite here that will be triggered only for this product exclusively in this store, because we're of course setting it at the prod store level. And just like with venue, stores, and tills, these at the product and prod store level do not override one another and do not act exclusive of the other, so they will stack, so to speak. What that does is gives us some flexibility where we could have a prerequisite to be able to sell a certain product in any store, and then within individual stores, we could have different prereqs that have to be met, or we could use a prerequisite only for some prod stores and not for others, as opposed to assigning a prerequisite just to a product overall. Also, the product and prod store level prerequisites are independent of the venue, store, and till level prereqs, meaning that we can actually mix and match up to 5 prerequisites that need to be met to sell a certain product within a specific store, potentially. They could even be the same prerequisites that could be triggered multiple times within the same sale if things are configured that way, so just keep that in mind when they're being set up. Now, some prerequisite types, like we've got one that's called age minimum, we'll see that in a couple minutes, will not prompt more than once within the same sale, but some. So like the OK prompt that we've set up here, or we've got one that's a yes no prompt, they can be triggered multiple times within the same transaction, even if it is the same exact prerequisite, if it's set at different levels, different components within the system. But for any prerequisite types that can be encountered multiple times, we do have an option in the prerequisite setup, which is labeled, it's a flag, it's labeled only once per transaction, and we can turn that on if we'd like to avoid the same prerequisite being encountered multiple times throughout a transaction. Should probably open a prerequisite type. I'll go back and open our demo OK prompt and show you that. So if we have this demo OK prompt, obviously again, very basic example here, but we could have this set along with where we have it set now at the, I believe I set this at the till level. We set this at the venue level. If we also had this set at, let's say, a product level or a prod store level, we could potentially encounter this same prompt twice. However, if we turned on the only once per transaction flag, we would only encounter it once per transaction. Cool, but a couple final points on assigning prerequisites. At the overall product level, we can set a prerequisite using the product change by range feature. So if I actually close that, we go back to our product list, we can set a prerequisite using the change by range feature. So it just makes things easier to be able to assign one to an entire product group all at once. Just need to go change by range, make sure that the correct product group is selected, obviously, and then we can set our prerequisite there and click OK and proceed. And for the prod store level also, we have that option here where we could select the product group and the store to apply the prerequisite to, select the prerequisite from the dropdown, click OK, and be able to quickly assign a prerequisite to multiple prod stores all at once. Now, in case I went too quick there for you, or you prefer to see all the implementation pieces together in slide form, here we've got the locations of the prerequisite settings for venue, stores, and tills. I'll leave that up on the screen for a couple seconds. And here for the product and prod store options for where those can be set. And the shortcuts for product change by range and prod store change by range. Okay, so on to some additional prerequisite use cases now that we've gone through and seen all of the different places throughout back office where prerequisites can be applied or can be assigned. What I'll do is I'm going to stop the recording here. I'm going to create another prerequisite. I'm going to assign it to one of these components and we can demonstrate a use case. Then we'll go over it. We'll see it in action in SmartPause and then we'll repeat for all the different prerequisite types and just go through them all one by one. All right, so we already saw an example of an OK prompt prerequisite type, but I've got another example here, another use case here. This is one that could be assigned to vegan products, so it'll show a simple prompt on the screen, essentially as a reminder to operators. So this prerequisite wouldn't be used in typical requirement sense, but again, rather just relaying a message and making sure that an operator sees and acknowledges the message. We could say that the prerequisite itself is just recognition or acknowledgement of the prompt and the text that's showing on the screen. So I will just save this one to leave it as is, but what I do actually want to do is disable our other OK prompt so we don't keep seeing that pop up as we proceed throughout these demonstrations. So I do have the vegan product prerequisite assigned to our cause salad here, just at the product level, not at the prod store level. So regardless of what store we sell this product in, we will encounter that prerequisite. So if we jump over to SmartPause, and I'll cancel that transaction, and we find that product, I believe it's under sides, and we ring that up, we are going to encounter our prerequisite here. That's going to be triggered, and we just need to essentially verify that we are reading that information and click OK to be able to proceed, and the product will be added to the transaction. So plenty of other similar use cases that I'm sure you could all come up with for OK prompts that would suit your venue, but we will just move on. Okay, next up we have our yes/no prompt prerequisite type, which basically takes the OK prompt a step further by adding an option for the operator to choose yes or no when the prompt text is displayed. And that in and of itself is essentially the prerequisite, or rather selecting yes is the condition that needs to be met to actually proceed. So one example for this could be similar to what I've added here with an allergen warning. For this specific example, we could assign the prerequisite at either the product or the prod store level for a product that may contain the allergen, nuts in this case. Now I would suggest entering some prompt text to this prerequisite type in order to explain the prerequisite. Otherwise, the prompt will just show the name of the prereq itself. So this one would say prerequisite nut allergen warning, yes or no. Now an operator could definitely be confused by that. Is it asking if the guest has an allergy? So when in doubt, I would recommend using prompt text, but I think for the rest of these today, we'll probably leave the prompt text fields blank so that we can actually see the default prompt text that will show. But in this case, like I said, it will just show the name of the prerequisite and then with options for yes or no, which can be confusing. So this would be probably a better option to set this up. And to go along with that, you can see that we have a different text field below that for entering some failed text. So that will explain what happens when no is chosen from the options. So if there's nothing entered into the failed text prompt or into the failed text field, there is no default text or anything that's going to show up. So literally nothing will happen. The product just will not be added to the transaction. Now that might be okay in some cases, but depends on the initial prompt text. So just use some judgment with whether or not failed text is required. And I do have this assigned to, save that. I do have that assigned to our almond tart, and I've got it saved at or assigned at the prod store level just to demonstrate that being at the prod store level, not only at the product level. So let's have a look at this in SmartPause. Alright, so first notice that if I add this here, we are not encountering any sort of prompt text. The prerequisite has not been triggered, but I'm pretty sure I know why. If we go back to that product, I have assigned this to our bulk beverage store, not to the main restaurant. So if I go ahead and switch to that store and we actually set our prerequisite to that prod store, and then we try that again. Now, when I add that product, we are indeed going to trigger that prerequisite. We're going to be hit with our prompt text, our prompt here. This product may contain nuts. Again, this is the text that I had entered. Choosing yes will add it to the sale. No will not. So you can see if we choose no, we'll then get our failed text prompt. Sorry, this product will not be added to the sale. Again, if we don't have any failed text entered, that wouldn't show, nothing would show here. The product would just simply not be added to the transaction like it hasn't been here. Now, if we try that again, we click yes this time around, it will add that to the transaction. Now I should mention that the prompt only showed there again twice in that same transaction because the only once per transaction flag is off for this. So again, I'm sure there's plenty of examples out there that we could come up with for the yes/no prompt prerequisite type to be implemented at any level, the venue, store, till, product, or prod store. So yeah, plenty of options out there. I'm sure you can think of others than what I've got here. But next we have our age minimum prerequisite type, which I'm sure we can all imagine what that would be used for. So let me set one up here, and we'll have a look at all of the options for this in just a second. Alright, so this prerequisite type, obviously it's meant to be used where a customer needs to be of certain legal age to purchase or consume a product. Most common examples are, of course, alcohol and tobacco products. So this prerequisite could be assigned at any level, at a venue, store, or till, if the guest needs to be of age to purchase anything within the venue overall, or at a specific store location within the venue, or if maybe a particular till only sells age-restricted items. Or we could create one of these and set it at the product or the prod store level for an item itself that requires an age minimum or a minimum age. As for the setups for this prerequisite type has some things that we have seen already with the prompt and the failed text, but it also has a few configuration components that are specific to this age minimum prerequisite type. So first and most importantly probably, we can see the age minimum so that the system knows what the age requirement actually is. We can also opt to display name and age prompt, and I'll leave these flags on for now so we can see what will happen in Smart Pause for these. This second one here, we can also choose to display a manual entry button, meaning that operators can enter the guest's date of birth and the system will determine whether or not the age minimum has been met based on the date of birth that has been entered. So what I might do here for no hats, no stars is assign this to all of our alcoholic beverages, and as I showed earlier, there's an easy way to do it using the product change by range feature. So I'll head back to the product list, and as you know, as I demonstrated earlier, just right click on the product list, go to product change by range. By default, obviously whichever product group we had selected there, right clicked on is going to be selected. If we've clicked the wrong one, we can just choose whichever one we'd like. Then our prerequisite dropdown will now have that because we've just created it and saved it, and just click OK, and we will then assign that to those 6 products. And then we can continue on to all of the other product groups that contain age-restricted items, and we can do the same. So I will just quickly do that, and I'll sort of zoom through this. Oh, and then when we are all finished with that, just go ahead and close the window, and we can double check if we just want to make sure. And we can see if we go to the product settings tab, that has been added as the prerequisite for that, and we could save and go to next and just confirm that that has been applied to a few of those there if we would like to double check. But very simple and efficient way of implementing product prerequisites at the product level, or again, we could use the store change by range to implement them at the prod store level. Cool, so let's check that out in Smart Pause now that we have added that. And I will point out a couple things while going through the process and explaining what those two flags control that I had turned on that we saw a couple minutes ago or a minute ago. So if I select any of our alcoholic products that we've added that age restriction or age minimum prerequisite to, the first thing to note is the prompt itself. So in this case, I haven't entered any prompt text or failed text because we already know that if text is entered into those fields, it's going to override the defaults. And for this example, I wanted to show you the default prompts because for the age minimum prereq type, they are very informative and pretty helpful. So the prompt is going to show a message here reading, you must be 18 years. Obviously the number in there is going to be determined by what's been set within the prerequisite, but in this case, you must be 18 years old or over to purchase this product. You must be born on or before the 29th of June, 2004. So it not only displays the age minimum that we've set up, 18 in this case, but it also calculates the date of birth that's needed based on the current day, the minimum date of birth. So personally, I would prefer this over some alternate prompt text being entered, but you might disagree. You might want to have some different prompt text to show. Now the second line down here, please scan an ID card now or select from the options below. That sentence is only there because we have that display manual entry flag turned on. So with that flag on, we are going to have the option down here to enter a date of birth manually, or we can scan a card if that type of hardware is connected to the till where ID cards can be scanned. Now, we also have an option for an operator override. So if an operator has manager override privileges, they can override an age minimum prerequisite. Now, if that flag, the display manual entry flag, is off, we will just have the first part of the prompt here. Now, whether that be the default message that we're seeing here or any prompt text that's been entered, if the display manual entry flag is turned off, we would only see that. In that case, there also will not be the override or the manual entry buttons here. Instead, there would just be cancel button and a button that says age OK. So essentially with the display manual entry button flag turned off, we are turning off the functionality to enter a date of birth and have the system tell us if we can proceed or not. And we're just putting it in the hands of the operator to manually check the date of birth and then tap on the button that would say age OK. So of course it's up to you, but it is recommended to turn that flag on as I've done here for this prerequisite type to fully work as intended. So if we were to use this override button here, that's that, age overridden, the product is added to the transaction. But again, the operator does need manager override privileges to be able to do that. Now, if I cancel this and we go again, cool. Now, if we do enter an acceptable date of birth, if I go with the manual entry there and we do enter an acceptable date of birth, oh, by the way, I should mention this, we do need to put dashes in here to format that correctly. Cool, so the prerequisite condition has been met here. The product is added to the transaction and we can proceed. Notice also that the date of birth entered is shown in the transaction window as age entered and then the date of birth. But if I cancel that, we go with another transaction here and I enter a date that is not acceptable. We are going to get a failed prompt is going to show, and there's two parts to this one. So up top, we have the date and age prompt showing the date entered and the age calculated from that. So obviously we can't sell this product to a 12-year-old. And the reason that that is displaying is because that display name and age prompt flag is turned on. So the second part is going to be the default failed text down here. So sorry, you must be 18 years old or over to purchase this product. Again, the 18 is being pulled from the prerequisite setup. And again, we can enter alternate text for the failed prompt if we'd like to, but this portion down here is the failed prompt, and this portion up here is related to that display name and age prompt flag, which is turned on for the prerequisite. So one other key point for this prerequisite type is that it will only ever be triggered once per transaction, even if it's assigned to multiple products or at different levels So if it's assigned at the till level and the product level, it will only be triggered once for the same transaction, which is why I needed to keep restarting new transactions to have it be triggered again. So you can see once we have met the conditions of that prerequisite and we add another product to the transaction that would normally trigger that prerequisite if it were a new transaction, it will not be triggered again within the same. And that's there. If we go back to that prerequisite type, there is actually not a flag here to turn that off or on. It will just always, the system will just always behave that way. Cool. So that's one of the more important and more widely used prereq types that we've got, but we do have a few others to get to. So I will set up the next one and we will move on. All right, so moving on to the account profile prerequisite type. This is another one. I think you can probably guess how it works from the name of it. Yes, that's right. The condition that needs to be met is that an account matching to the designated account profile needs to be active in order to proceed. Or we can set it to any account like I've done here for this example. So whether this is assigned at a store, venue, till, product, or prod store level is obviously entirely up to the venue depending on how you'd like to utilize this prerequisite type. And with the multitude of ways that we can set up account profiles, which we've seen before, we know that there's loads of different fields that we can set and also the account custom fields that we can create and set for account profiles, that there is no shortage of use cases that we could come up with for this prereq type. So at a venue, store, or till level, we might have a broader approach. So either the all accounts option like I've got here, or we could set up and use an account profile with maybe just some basic criteria. So maybe just that the account has to have an active status and maybe belong to a particular account group, and that might be it for the profile, and we could assign that and assign that account profile to the prerequisite and then assign the prerequisite at one of the appropriate levels or components that we can. But maybe even at a store or till level, we would create and use an account profile with some more significant or more narrowed or focused profile criteria. And similarly, if we were going to create an account prereq to assign to a specific product or prod store, we could do something like maybe create some custom fields, some account custom fields, use them within the account profile, and then link it to the prerequisite. But anyway, this one is very straightforward. So I just have this assigned to a till. If we go to our venue, store, and till list, this is assigned to our till, and that product prerequisite dropdown is in here on the till setup tab in this general section over here on the bottom right. So I've just got that assigned here. And obviously there could be some much better use cases out there for this prerequisite type, but even for just this basic one, it could be that maybe the till is meant to be used for account sales only or something like that. So let's take a look at this one in action. All right, so if I do not have an account attached at all here and I try to begin a transaction, I try to add any product to a new retail transaction here, or if we were in a table sale, that would work too. But we are going to be hit with our default prompt text saying you must select an account before selling this product. So the prerequisite condition in this case is not being met because I have not attached any account to the sale, and we cannot proceed. So a pretty simple concept for this prerequisite type, but can be a very powerful one in venues that do use accounts. So if I do go ahead and attach an account, again, any account for this example, that prerequisite condition is being met and I can proceed. So yeah, we can see that with an understanding of the power and use of account profiles, how this can then translate into prerequisite implementation also. Cool, so next up we have our operator prerequisite type. You can probably guess the basis of this, but let me set one up for this and we'll come back and go through it. Okay, so I've got a basic operator prerequisite type set up here. This follows a somewhat similar logic to the account profile prerequisite type, but it applies the precondition to the operator that's logged into SmartPOS. So we can choose either a specific operator or an operator group. If we scroll down through here, we can see the operator groups are listed at the top. And then as we scroll to the bottom, we will have our individual operators. So I've got a specific operator group selected here. We're essentially saying that depending on where we have the prereq assigned, only this person or this group of operators can process transactions either in the venue or the store or specific till, or to sell a certain product altogether. Now, as seen here in this example, I've got our dinner waitstaff operator group designated for this prerequisite. That means that only operators who are directly in that group will be able to pass the conditions of the prerequisite and be able to continue. So, real world scenario, although this might be a bit of a stretch, but it's easy to demonstrate this way. We might assign this like I've got here. I have assigned it to our store level for our main restaurant. And at the store level, again, this is up here on the top left of the general tab. But in this case, only operators that belong to the dinner waitstaff operator group will even be able to begin a transaction in this store. So let's take a look. So at the moment, I'm not logged in as a dinner waitstaff operator. So if I try to begin a transaction, this is regardless of whether or not I'm actually in a table sale at the moment. There's a different prerequisite type that pertains to that. We'll see that in a second. This is just relating to the operator that I am logged in as at the moment. And because I'm not logged in as an operator who's in that dinner waitstaff operator group, and that prerequisite is assigned at the store level for our main restaurant that we're using a till in here, if I try to begin a transaction, I will not be able to. I'll be hit with a little notification prompt here that says your login operator does not allow selling this product. So that's the default text there, by the way. Again, we could obviously add a different prompt text if we would like to. However, if I do log out and I log in as an operator who is in the dinner waitstaff operator group, I will be able to add products, but you'll notice that I am encountering one of the other prerequisites that we have set up and assigned. Because these are going to stack, so they're assigned to different components, they're stacking together here, and you can see that we might need to pass through each one in order to start the transaction or to sell certain products. So just to show you here, if I do go ahead and attach an account, now we're meeting the criteria or the condition of that prerequisite. Because I'm logged in as an operator who is in the dinner waitstaff operator group, we are meeting the conditions of that prerequisite, but now we still have this age minimum prerequisite that we're encountering also. And we can meet the conditions of that by selecting age override here, because the operator that I'm logged in as has the ability to do that. So all for that one product that we've added there, there are actually 3 separate prerequisites that we have encountered and needed to meet the conditions of in order to proceed and actually add that product to the transaction. So some other use cases for this prerequisite type, not this prerequisite type, but for the operator prerequisite type, we could create one and assign at the venue, store, or till level for a similar effect. We could have the operator list. This could be a separate scenario, different to how we've got things set up in this database. But we could have the operator list split out into groups where they're broken up into venues or stores to maintain some further granular control, along with the allowed venues operator settings and the use till allowed stores settings. This could then add some further control over where operators can actually sell products or begin transactions, or at a product or prod store level. So maybe only certain operators can sell certain products. In some jurisdictions, only people over a certain age can sell or handle alcohol, for example. So we could have separate operator groups, one under 18, maybe one over 18, something similar. And we could use the over 18 operator group set as the operator group in the prerequisite here. Or maybe at a product or prod store level, there could be a top shelf product that we only want a manager group or even a specific individual to be able to sell. And again, I'm sure you could come up with your own examples, but we will move on to our next prerequisite type here. Okay, so along the lines of a prerequisite type being used to limit transactions to a particular group of accounts or by an operator or operator group, you can most likely guess what the table group prereq type is going to be used for. One use case for this, within the prerequisite setup, set the table group, like I've done here, to one that's used for our dining table group, or for our dining tables. And then at the till level, if we head back there, we could change this from our any account product prerequisite to our table one. I think this is one where we do need to restart back office for this to show. Yep, there we go. So I should mention that for some of these prerequisite types to either show from the product prerequisite dropdowns or to go into effect and be encountered in SmartPause to be triggered, either back office or SmartPause or Smart Controller, do need to be restarted respectively. But yeah, then we've got this assigned here at the till level. So the prerequisite being assigned to a till in the restaurant so that when using that particular till, transactions can only be created within that table group. So we might have a scenario where within a store, there's different tills that are used for different purposes, and we could have one of them be designated purely for sales for a particular product group, a particular table group, for example. So the prerequisite condition that has to be met is that the selected table group needs to be used. If no table group is selected or another table group is selected when starting a transaction, the operator is going to encounter the prompt text, which we will see in SmartPause in a second. I do just want to point out that if I save that, and we go back to our prerequisite, that there is an option in here for any table group that's available from that dropdown. So we could use that for a prerequisite and assign it at maybe a higher level, so maybe at the venue or the store level, so that we're not saying that transactions have to be to a specific table group, but just that a table group needs to be used for a sale to be started. Or at a product or prod store level, we might have certain products in the database that can only be sold to certain table groups, maybe food items that are only available for a gaming room table group, or a group of beverages that are only available at bistro tables, something along those lines. Cool, well, let's take a look at this one in SmartPause. Alright, so if I do not first begin a table transaction using that table group, I will not be able to start the transaction period. In this case, we're not going to be able to start a retail transaction at all if this prerequisite is being used and that condition is not being met. We're going to get our default prompt here. This product requires a table transaction before it can be sold. So again, if we don't add any override text in the prereq setup, but we can change that if we would like to, depending on the table group that's being used. We might opt to have something else show there. But if we do create a new table here, and the transaction is now using the table group that is designated within the prerequisite, we are meeting the criteria or the condition of the prerequisite is being met, and we will now be able to proceed. Again, we're going to hit some other prerequisites that we have set up here and need to make sure that we're going to hit the conditions of those as well. But there we go, just a couple more prerequisite types to go through here and we will have this lesson wrapped up shortly. Alright, so this next one is a little bit different but very useful across the board. For the within a scheduled prerequisite type, the condition that needs to be met is that we are within a scheduled time. So the scheduling module here, if I open this up, is just as it is anywhere else within back office. So we can add multiple periods within the same prerequisite. We can set them up for a certain time of day, like I've done here, a particular day of the week, monthly, annually. We can even have some overall start and end dates set up if we would like to. One use case that I came up with here is where this is scheduled for just dinner time every day. We could then assign this at a venue, store, or till level, essentially saying that the condition that needs to be met is that the current time must be between 5 and 10 p.m. for a transaction to be started there. Or alternatively, we could assign the prerequisite to a specific product or a prod store where an item is only available to be sold during that time frame. A specific product can only be sold during a certain time frame. Another idea at the product level could be for seasonal items. So we could create a schedule in the prerequisite with just overall start and end dates, but within that date range, the product would be available 24/7. In a similar vein, there might be a product that's only available on a single specific date once a year or something like that. But for our example here, if I save this, I do have this assigned at the store level. So let's see what happens when we attempt to start a transaction there now. We are outside of those hours. So I should mention, by the way, that for the within a schedule prerequisite type, Smart Controller does need to be restarted for the prereq to take effect. But if I do try to start a transaction here now, I will be hit with the default text that's going to say this product can only be sold within the below schedule, and then the schedule is being shown there. And that's it. The prerequisite conditions are not being met, so we cannot proceed. Now again, we can enter some alternate text to show here if we'd like to, depending on how the prerequisite is being set up and how it's going to be implemented. In this case, because we have this set at the store level, maybe it doesn't make sense for the prompt to read this product can only be sold within the below schedule. We might enter some override text there to the effect of products can only be sold here or in this store within the below schedule. But cool, just one final prereq type to cover is going to be one that we have skipped over. You can see it's kind of in the middle here, our key map selected, so I'll set this one up. You can see there isn't much to set up here at all, but I'll create one, I'll save it and assign it, and then we'll come back in a second. Alright, so I've got that set up. I will actually need to also disable this dinner menu prerequisite type so that we don't keep encountering that in SmartPause. But lastly, like I said, we did skip over this key map selected prerequisite type earlier. I saved this for the end because it's a little bit different than the others. The idea behind this prereq type is a simple one. The condition that needs to be met is that a key map has been selected. Not a specific key map. You can see there's nothing to select there as far as which key map needs to be selected, just a key map, period. Now the reasoning behind this, or the intended use of this prerequisite type, is for venues with different prices for dine-in and takeaway. As you can see, as I mentioned a minute ago, there isn't much of anything to set up here aside from some optional prompt text. So I have this assigned at the till level, which would be one of the more likely scenarios for this prerequisite type. If we go to our venue store and till list, I've got this assigned here at the till level. So for how this prerequisite type is intended to be used, within one key set then, there would be duplicates of the same key maps, but with different price levels for the second set. So we've got two that have no change for the price number, drinks and food, and then separate iterations of drinks and food key maps here, but with our takeaway pricing. Then we can go ahead and see how that would work at the till. So if I try to select an item prior to first selecting a key map tab, any key map tab, the prerequisite text prompt that I entered comes up, in this case asking if I've selected the correct pricing menu for dine-in and takeaway. But then after tapping one of the key maps, we are meeting the criteria or the condition of the prerequisite has been met, and we can proceed with the transaction. But as you can see, again, depending on the product that we're selecting, we may be hit with other prerequisites that have been set up and assigned. So as we come to an end here for this lesson, this would be a good time to make a point that if we are using multiple prerequisites together, some thought will need to go into which are assigned at which level. For example, if we have one prerequisite that might be assigned at the venue level, even if it needs to be implemented at all stores and tills in the venue, is it actually best to assign it at the venue level? If it's being used in conjunction with another prerequisite type like a table group or operator or age minimum, maybe not, since of course we can only set one prerequisite per component. So maybe an age minimum prerequisite should be assigned at the venue level so that we're covering that at a broader level, and then another prerequisite assigned at the store level, and then various maybe operator prerequisites could be assigned to appropriate tills, or whatever the case may be in your venue. The main point to consider is just that while we can mix and stack multiple prerequisites together, we should always consider where and how they're being assigned when they're being implemented together. Since they don't override or exclude one another, it's just going to be up to each individual implementation circumstance as far as which are assigned at the venue level, till level, etc. There may be multiple prerequisites that should be applied to the venue overall, but obviously only one can actually be assigned to the venue. And it isn't necessarily a case of choosing wisely, more so just to be considerate of potential changes down the line. The table group prerequisite type is a good example, so while we could have one set for any table group and we could assign that maybe at the venue level to make sure that every transaction is to a table, it might make more sense to have various table group prerequisites and assign them at a store or a till level so that the venue prerequisite can be used for something else, like maybe an operator or an account prerequisite. Or maybe all of what I just said there could be turned completely the other way around, upside down. It will ultimately just come down to planning or preference. Now, obviously, these are easy enough to change, so there isn't too much harm that can't be undone if it comes down to it anyway. But yeah, that will do it for this lesson. Hopefully, you've got some good use cases for implementing prerequisites throughout your organization, and now you know how to do so. So as always, thanks for watching.